Hello, everyone, and welcome to Building SaaS on AWS, the flagship show for SaaS here on Twitch. My name is Gunnar Grosch, developer advocate at AWS, and if you're building or planning to build a SaaS product, this is the show for you. What we do here is that we bring on experts to dive deep into SaaS-specific topics so you can learn more about, building SaaS on AWS. And we want this show to be highly interactive. So if you have questions, if you have comments, if you want to learn more about building SaaS on AWS, just pop those questions into the chat. And my on-screen experts and my in-chat experts will do everything they can to answer those questions. And like I mentioned, every week I'm joined by experts, and this week is no different. Now I'm joined by Ron from Epsagon and Alex from AWS SaaS Factory. Welcome to the show, both of you.
Hello.
Hello. Happy to be here.
Oh, great. We can hear Alex as well. Great to have you both. We always do the quick round of introductions, so let's follow that outline and do it this time as well. Ron, let's start with you.
Yeah. Hi, all. So I am Ron. I am in Epsagon for almost 5 years. And I am leading the architecture. We are now part of Cisco, and I have a lot of experience with integrating AWS, working with serverless. Yeah.
Great. Welcome, Ron, to the show. Alex, people might know who you are already.
Well, we'll never know until we know, right? So I'm a solutions architect on the SaaS Factory team, as you mentioned, and briefly about what we do. We help AWS partners to accelerate SaaS application development. It can also be migration or modernization use cases. And we also maintain AWS SaaS Factory Insights Hub, where you can find collection of resources that can help you at any stage of your SaaS and AWS journey.
All right, welcome, Alex. And sometimes I ask my guests to tell a fun story about themselves, but in this case, I'm going to share a fun story about Alex, actually. So a little known fact is that Alex has his own fan club within AWS. Anything you want to tell about that, Alex?
Oh boy! Every time I do the monkey, like closed eyes icon, when people add this link, I actually have no idea why people think I know anything, but I know why ruin the illusion, right?
Exactly. All right. So we, of course, have a topic each week as well. And this week, as you might have guessed, is a topic related to what Epsagon and Ron are doing. So we're going to talk and learn more about how you at Epsagon have built onboarding and offboarding flows and how that integrates with your customers' AWS environment. So maybe start off by mentioning a bit about Epsagon and what Epsagon does.
Yeah. So like I said, Epsagon was founded in 2018 to help serverless environment, serverless users mostly in AWS environments, to monitor the application, to understand what the application is doing, and to be able to troubleshoot issues very efficient. And at some point, we also changed the scope to a much broader one to focus on cloud native application in general, more to the container, the Kubernetes world as well. And yeah, this is basically what we're doing. We are focused on distributed tracing. And this is it.
Yeah, and then what brought you to solve the problem that you are solving?
Yeah, so I think that especially back then and also today, this is a very big problem that a lot of customers are having, to be able to understand, okay, I have my application, it's running, but how do I know that everything works okay? And if there is an issue, even if a specific user has some kind of a problem, how can I find it very efficiently? Especially now, the applications are very distributed. Usually, if you use microservices or serverless, you have a lot of moving parts, and you need to connect all the relevant data to correlate it and to show some big picture that will have users, the developers, and DevOps people to understand their applications. And actually, we will see some of it during this session.
All right. And you mentioned that it started out with serverless, and then to also the more, what's called cloud native with Kubernetes container solutions as well. But who do you see are the target customers for Epsagon?
Yeah, so the target customers are any cloud native based users. We know that many of the users now are not invested in one technology, and they use different technologies to different parts of their systems, and their applications are evolving with the technology in the market as well. So many of them are having many Lambda functions and very invested on that, but as well as containers and Kubernetes. And also some of them are almost 100% on containers. But basically, if we are mostly using containers, either Kubernetes, ECS, or serverless, we will be happy to help.
Right. And if you're a returning viewer of the show, you know that this is not just 2 or 3 talking heads on screen all the time. We are, of course, going to show things in practice as well. And I think it's time to do that straight away so that we understand what we're actually talking about, Ron. So maybe we should start off by giving a demo of what we're actually talking about.
Yeah. So let's focus on how we integrate the AWS account of our customers with the Epsagon backend. So Epsagon is a product built for developer and technical persons, and we want to make sure that they could just create an account on Epsagon and be able to integrate their systems very easily without much hassle, so they can see the value as early as possible. And this is why we tried to make the onboarding, and especially the cloud integration is an important part of it, very easy and quick. So what we see here is the Epsagon dashboard, and basically after you create an account, this is a test account, of course. You will go to the screen, and which helps you to get started, and we'll go with the monitor your environment part. So we choose AWS, and now we want to integrate the AWS account into Epsagon. This will, as you can see here, this will give us read-only permissions mostly, and be able to understand what's running in your cloud account, and then show this information in Epsagon. And this is again the first step. So to make that happen, you only need to click on this button. Now we have a new tab, which is on the AWS console on CloudFormation. So this is again a testing AWS account. And on this page, we just need to create this CloudFormation stack. So everything is already made by Epsagon. We have the template URL that defines what resources are we going to create. So CloudFormation, by the way, is just a way to deploy a lot of resources under the same stack, and then manage them and together, update them, delete them later. So it's a very efficient way for us to deploy this kind of resources in the AWS account. So this is the stack. I can see some information. I can also change the name if I want. This is the external ID. We'll talk about it soon, I believe, which you shouldn't change. I should only click this button, and then I am creating a stack. So now I'm just in the CloudFormation again console, and it will take about 2 minutes to create a new stack. I can see the kind of resources that are being built. So we have an IAM role to create to give us permission to query data from the account, and as well as other resources that we will talk about soon, I believe. And yeah, if I will go back here, so now we are waiting for the integration to happen, and shortly we will see some stats about the monitored AWS account. So we see that we have 6 S3 backends and 14 Lambda functions. And this is basically the first step of this integration. And there are a bunch of things behind the scenes to make this happen, so easy.
All right.
Yeah.
So, and when we've done this onboarding, then, as you said, a lot of things are happening behind the scenes. I believe you have an architecture to show us what is actually happening behind the scenes, and looking at it from an Epsagon perspective rather than from the customer's perspective, like we saw now.
Yeah, exactly. So let's jump to our architecture. This is kind of still a little simplified diagram, of course, and it shows what happens when we just did what we did. So let's start going through the major parts. So first, this is what is going to run on the customer's AWS account, and we want to create this CloudFormation. The most important part of it is the IAM role I just mentioned. So this role is actually, we can see it here. This role can help us to understand a lot of information about the AWS account that we will monitor. So for example, we can get read-only access to see all the Lambda function and the S3 buckets like I showed before, and as well as other kind of access like that. So this is a very important part of it.
Ron?
We also,
Ask a question? Yeah.
Sure.
So you show here the AWS account, but we usually work with partners that maintain multi-account landing zones, right, for their solutions. So they could have different environments, or sometimes even for dedicated infrastructure per their customer, right? So how would that solution work with multiple AWS accounts if I need to integrate multiple ones?
Yeah, so basically it's not a problem at all. After, let's say, we integrated this account, I can add as many as AWS accounts that I want. On our backend, we will be sure to tag all the resources that we know to the specific AWS account that it's deployed on. So you can just do this process as many times as you would like. And also, if you would like to remove the integration for some of the AWS accounts, you could do that as well.
And so you essentially kind of tie those AWS accounts to Epsagon account in a way?
So it's like a many-to-one kind of relationship. Each Epsagon account could have many AWS accounts related to it, and actually it's being managed in this DynamoDB table. So we'll have an AWS account record for each AWS account, which is also correlated to an Epsagon account or Epsagon tenant.
And how, if you can maybe elaborate, how do you make this mapping essentially between the, how do you establish this mapping between AWS accounts and Epsagon accounts?
Yeah, so when we have a new integration being deployed, so like I said, the user just needs to deploy this CloudFormation. We need to know at the Epsagon backend that it happened, and there is a new CloudFormation that gives us permission to start monitoring this account, this AWS account. We use this kind of something called a custom resource on deployed on the CloudFormation. And this resource is basically just sends us using an SNS topic information about this new CloudFormation. So we know the AWS account, the number that created it, and also we have the external ID that we saw before on the CloudFormation. So this is also something that is defined here. In the using this external ID later, we can correlate it using another table that we have to the correct Epsagon account that we have in our system. And now we know that this AWS account should be correlated to this Epsagon account.
Got you. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Right, let's keep on going in the architecture.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so yeah, actually this question really moved us to the next part. So like I said, now we as Epsagon needs to know again that there is a new AWS account to be monitored. So we use this feature of custom resource. By the way, if I will go to the settings here, I can also create and try to create a new integration. So here we can see, again, we're on the same screen to create a CloudFormation. And if I go to this template, I will be able to see all the information. So for example, this is the IAM role with all the permissions that you can see here, as well as other resources. So this is the custom resource that I said, and we configure it to send to us the external ID. And then we have this Lambda function that will receive this external ID. It invokes another function, and this function will query the external ID to make sure that it's valid and to find out which Epsagon account it relates to. And then it will save this new record to another table. And the next part will be to start all the scanning that we need to do to the account. And this part we want to do asynchronously because we have different kind of services that we are monitoring. So this is why we use another SNS topic. So this is this role activated topic 1. And we will send a message to it. And then we have a bunch of subscribers as well written as Lambda functions that will start all the scanning that we saw before.
And how those service scanners essentially gain access to the Epsagon role? I guess they use that to scan.
Yeah, exactly. So to make sure that we use the correct IAM role, we also send it from the Epsagon reporter all the way through the pipeline here, and then it's saved in this AWS accounts table. And then whenever some resource needs it on our account, he needs to query to find what is the role ARN. Also to query the external ID. It's also needed in AWS to do this kind of cross AWS accounts APIs. And then we use these credentials to do all the operations that, again, were allowed by the Epsagon role.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, I think another small part to know is that actually the front end of the Epsagon application also queries the external ID, so that when you click on this deploy button before, it will create a link that already includes the correct external ID as part of the URL. You can just see it here. So this includes the external ID and also, of course, the template that it is saved on S3. Okay. So I think another important part is the CloudTrail, which we didn't cover yet. So like I said at the beginning, we want to do the initial scan to find all the resources. But then, of course, they're constantly changed. So for example, a new Lambda could be deployed, a new ECS task, or maybe removed. So the most efficient way to do that is to use CloudTrail, which generate events for such operations, and then we want to make sure that these events are being streamed to our AWS account, so we can process them and update our inventory accordingly. So to do that, there is a little trick here, I would say. So because since we want to monitor many different AWS regions, we need to create this kind of a CloudTrail rule in each one of the regions. Now, the problem here is that the CloudFormation is only deployed to one region, and we wouldn't want to ask the customer to deploy it on every region. It will take too much time and effort. So the solution that we use here is that our role also gives us specific rights permissions to create this rule in all of the regions, and then we have a Lambda function, which is, by the way, deployed on all the regions that we support, that will make sure to once there is a new AWS rule, it will create this rule in all the supported AWS regions. So this is a way that we use, so that again, we don't need to ask to deploy our CloudFormation in all the regions. We just, the specific resources that we need, we will create ourselves.
And that means that when we at AWS launch a new region, you first add that support for the region, having that Lambda function in place. And then from there on, it could start picking up those changes if the customer starts deploying Lambda functions, for instance.
Exactly. Yeah, so we have like a bunch of different resources that are deployed to many regions all over the globe. And by the way, there is another one here, which is this SNS topic. So also the Epsagon reported, again, is what's called a custom CloudFormation resource, is able to send an SNS message only on the same region. So because I don't want to limit our customers to choose only specific regions here, they can just deploy the CloudFormation in any of the regions. We made sure to deploy this SNS topic in all the regions, or almost all of them.
Oh, that's very important, actually. And by the way, since you mentioned the Epsagon reporter, I see that it kind of kicks off the onboarding flow, right? We didn't talk about onboarding yet, but for the onboarding flow, it should, I guess, wait until all of this flow is completed before it essentially reports back that, okay, we're good to go. So how does that work?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And fortunately, AWS architects thought about this as well. So we need to make sure that when this CloudFormation was deployed, that everything here worked, and actually we were able to receive the request, to say whatever we need. And if there was some kind of a problem, for example, the external ID is not correct, we want it to be reflected on the CloudFormation side. So to do that, the custom reporter is sending us a callback URL that we make sure, after we see that everything worked okay, on this Lambda, we were able to save this new AWS account to verify the external ID. We just need to call this callback, and only after we do that, the CloudFormation status will be changed to completed, and this resource will be initiated successfully.
Gotcha. Oh, and by the way, that actually picked up my thought about another question I wanted to ask about this interaction, because when we integrate with customer environments, both customer and SaaS provider, right, they want to really have secure connectivity and well-controlled environment on both sides, right? So we talked about, how the customer can look at the template and make sure that whatever permissions the role has and whatever resources they deploy, they're fine with, right? And you also have kind of a controlled inbound communication, so what topics you expose, right, to get those onboarding requests. And actually, how do you control, or what is your approach to controlling these onboarding processes, right, on your side, on this NS topic, for example?
Yeah, so first we have, like I showed before, we have this kind of templates that you use to deploy. And actually, if a customer wants, he can make changes on this template to, for example, if you want to disable some of the permissions, etc. And I think this is the most part. I'm not sure, but I answered your question.
Yeah, thanks. I thought more on it seems that Epsagon Reporter, to be more concrete, I can take this template, right, that contains it and deploy it in any AWS account, not necessarily that is registered with Epsagon, right? And then I can just kind of pollute the CloudFormation status topic as an message. So what is your approach to kind of handling this?
Okay. Yeah, sure. So first of all, this kind of message is an internal AWS message, because this SNS topic, it doesn't have some exposed endpoints that anyone from the internet could send message to it. It's only AWS. And then when there is an AWS account number on this topic, we know for sure that this reporter was deployed on, or this message was sent from this AWS account. So this external, once you have the external ID, is like kind of gives right permission. So if you have it, yes, you can deploy the custom reporter on basically any AWS account to send the data, and basically this is how we make sure that we tell our customers that the external ID should be something that it's private and shouldn't be shared with anyone. I can also add to that it is possible to do it a little bit more safe if some like other applications that our viewers would like to do that. So it is possible to create another ID that will be generated only after you authenticated to the Epsagon application or to your application. So we do use this static ID, and we didn't have any problem with it. But this is also some kind of more sophisticated implementation that could be added.
And would this approach kind of add maybe more, like in terms of friction? Like I guess you had some trade-off discussion, right? Or like, what were your thoughts around more friction, maybe more security, or potentially, right, or more control? I would say, not necessarily more of the security, right, or less friction. So what were the other options maybe you considered?
Yeah, so we were really trying to do this as much friction as possible, as well as in other areas, and
friction.
Yeah, and I think it worked. It worked well.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, so this is Building SaaS on AWS. My name is Gunnar, and I'm joined by Ron from Epsagon today and Alex from AWS SaaS Factory. And we're looking at how Epsagon has built their onboarding and offboarding flows to be able to integrate with AWS customers' environments. And maybe it's time to switch over and look at the AWS side of the onboarding to have a look at how that works, Ron.
Yeah. So actually, to show that, what I'm going to do is to show a trace from our backend that shows that. So we have our SDKs installed on the Lambdas over here, and it sends the data to another environment that we have that's actually used to monitor and troubleshoot our production environment, another instance of Epsagon application. So this is it here, and I will just hit the search here to search for new traces. So I'm searching now traces for that relates to this SNS topic. It's called CloudFormation Status Production, that receives the integration request from the customer AWS side. So this is the trace on Epsagon. So first we can see an overview of it. So we have the first Lambda function that handled the event. Actually, we can also see here, sorry, it's over here, we can see the SNS message. So this is the response URL that it's the callback that we will make a request to after the integration is completed. And we can also see the external ID and the role ARN that we were talking about it before. Then we have all the parts responsible for verifying the external ID, saving the data about the new AWS account, and then we publish an SNS topic that will trigger a bunch of scanners for Lambda, ECS, AppSync, etc., to start scan the environment and the CloudTrail events. So I can also see it on the timeline. We can see that it took about 40 seconds, and most of it was running asynchronously. So this, for example, verifying the external ID, saving a new AWS account. So you can see here the status, the data that we had. Yeah.
Can you maybe expand the trace on like the names of the resources there, so we can maybe
yeah, sure. That's a good idea. So you can see all the names. So we can see all the data that we save on the DynamoDB. By the way, another thing that is it's useful is to save the nickname of the account. So there is also an AWS API call that we'll make, and we have the permissions for it granted by the Epsagon role. So this nickname can be actually used after in our product. So most of the customers don't remember the AWS account IDs. So it's much easier to work like that. And then we have all the kind of scanning the account. For example, here we create the CloudTrail rule. This is in US East 1, and also the target. By the way, this rule, you don't see the information here, but it's configured to only send specific events to our AWS account. It's not everything that happens in an environment. That will be very inefficient. So only, for example, we deploy a new function, remove it, similar operations on ECS, and etc. So, for example, this is on another region, and this is in Europe. And then all the scanners. This is basically what happens on our account during onboarding.
It's cool to see the architecture you just showed and see how that actually looks from a trace perspective. You mentioned that, well, and you've shown that you're using CloudTrail, which is, I would say, a smart way to not have to constantly rescan for new resources. Does the user have the option to do a new scan of their environment if ever needed?
Yeah, definitely. So this is like for each service specifically. So if you go to the function or to mostly a specific Lambda function, for example, you can ask Epsagon to query the updated information to make sure that everything is synced. So this is also important. And by the way, I didn't explain much about how we process the CloudTrail. So there is also an AWS feature that we can configure to create this kind of CloudTrail rule that sends it to an event bus on our AWS account. And by the way, the role that we have here gives us permission to create these kind of rules that send data only to our AWS accounts. We can create a rule that will send it elsewhere. It's also important in terms of security. And then we have a Kinesis stream that receives this all these events from CloudWatch, and then we publish them to SNS. And the main reason that we use SNS here is that it gives us an easy way to filter different kind of events. If we want to find to process Lambda events only or ECS events, we have different kind of handlers here. So this is a nice way you can do it on the subscription level. And yeah, this is for us. We thought it was better, other than creating different kind of rules on the customer side, because we wanted to make it as much as smaller and cleaner, instead of making this bunch of different rules, and then maybe you need to change it over time when you want to add support for new kind of resources.
All right, and we've spent, well, almost 40 minutes now talking about how to onboard something, how to onboard AWS environment onto Epsagon. But another important topic, of course, is offboarding. So let's look at how you're doing offboarding.
Yeah. Actually, it's also very important, and I think maybe sometimes people delay this kind of question too much. It's also an important topic to think about. So actually, because we're using CloudFormation to deploy the main resources, it really helps us to have a framework for doing that correctly. So how it works, the same Epsagon reporter also publish messages when this resource is deleted. So what we ask our customers is that if you want to delete the stack, just delete it. You don't need to tell us. You don't need to do something in the console. So you can. There is only a single part that it's quite manual, that you need to delete the data from this S3 buckets to make sure that the CloudFormation stack is deleted without any problem. So I will just delete all this data. This includes events from CloudTrail of the last 24 hours or something like that. So I will just delete it here.
You actually, I think the only person I know that actually typed this instead of copy pasting from the line before.
Never seen it before.
Kudos.
Yeah, it doesn't work that well. So now I've deleted the bucket or the data, and I can just safely delete the stack. So now the stack will get deleted, and what happens here is that a message will be published to the same topic, but it will tell us that it was a delete operation, And now we need to make sure that we remove it from all our internal databases. But more importantly, we need to make sure we delete all the resources that we deployed, let's call it manually, and not via the CloudFormation. Like we said, we have these CloudTrail rules deployed in all regions. And again, I think the catch here is that we still need to use the Epsagon role to delete these kind of resources. If the role is deleted immediately, that's too late, and we can't clean up ourselves and delete these resources. So first of all, by the way, I can also show you a trace of how this looks. So the idea here is, again, so let's see it here. Oops, sorry. This is the correct one. So we can see on the SNS level that now the request type is delete. And once again, we have the response URL. So now it's very important that we call it only after we deleted all the related resources. So how we do that? Again, we want to delete all the resources asynchronously because it's deployed, like we said, in many regions. I want to make sure that it happens simultaneously. And this is why we use another SNS topic. But the problem is that I also want to know that only after all these lambdas are finished, I want I am able to call the response URL and to make sure that now deletes the reporter and delete all the CloudFormation. So yeah, actually, I was a little not correct here. This role is for the data that we create, that we delete on our AWS account, but we do have this step functions part that we use to we tell step functions, we create this kind of a machine that first deletes all the data in all the regions synchronously, and only after all the internal tasks are completed, we have the last task in these step functions that will call the URL, and only then the CloudFormation will be deleted.
So just to clarify, step functions is a service for building workflows, right? So you can do multiple steps and orchestrate essentially a series of operations, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's like very close to what we need here. It's kind of a workflow because we need to run a lot of operations to delete the resources and also wait for all these operations to end and then do the final operation, which is calling this response URL. Yeah.
And by the way, are there any, let's say, failure states that you take into account either during onboarding or offboarding that maybe we didn't cover?
So what do you mean by failure?
So, for example, what happens if I deploy the Epsagon CloudFormation template in AWS account and it sends a message, and then potentially there is a failure in one of the Lambda functions, right? So how would a recovery from that look like?
Yeah. So first of all, we have retries on many of the lambdas here. We also have our internal monitoring to make sure that we can jump in case of an unexpected problem. And yeah, and then we I think one thing that could be enhanced here to even do that better is to add an SQS topic in after some of the SNS topics here. So For example, in case there is some delivery problem, something like that, between the SNS function to the Lambda, it's like a common architecture to use another SQS. You can configure the SNS topic to automatically like publish the messages to SQS, and then we have like more kind of a way to process these messages, to retain them in the queue for longer, and stuff like that. So I don't think we have many problems with that over the last years, but it's definitely something that could improve and make it more robust. We do use it in other parts of our system.
Got it. Thank you. And actually, you know what? When you talk about offboarding and also like this interaction between the systems, I would say that at AWS we generally speak about control plane operations and data plane operations, where control plane operations is how we configure the resources, right? Or configure what we need to do. And then the data plane is actually the ongoing communication, in your case, between the customer AWS account and Epsagon account, right? So you have this paired AWS region, CloudWatch events, the default account does, and the forwarding rule that I see it sends events to Epsagon account, right? So maybe can you expand a little bit about this component on the data plane of yours? What does it do?
So yeah, so just to make sure I understand, you mean the events that are forwarded here? Yeah. So it's actually not very sophisticated. So like I said before, we have this rule that we created, and we configure it on which kind of events are we interested in. So for example, if you create a function, if you update it, if you delete it, and then we streamed it through another CloudWatch events and the Kinesis stream. And then we just, for example, we have a database that includes all the AWS Lambda functions on the customer side. So we just make sure to keep it up to date. And then, like I said before, we can also, the user can also trigger like a manual scan to make sure that it works. And basically, this is it.
Got it. Okay, and by the way, I think for our listeners, it's also important to mention that we also have the event reach service, right? And essentially CloudWatch events and event reach are the same underlying service and API, but event reach provides more features. So when you choose your, let's say, event messaging service, also have a look at event reach as well. So just make sure, because this one created was before I think event reach was available.
Yeah,
if I remember correctly.
So Ron, on this show we often talk about different ways of separating customers from each other. The architecture we looked at now, is that all in a pool model? So they are shared resources between all customers or tenants?
Yeah, that's true. This is a classic multi-tenant environment, and we make sure that that internally each Lambda invocation that we have on our side always works with data that is relevant to a specific tenant, that it it got it in some way. So for example, here it will be by the external ID, and here it's by the AWS account, because we know that these CloudWatch events, for example, bus can receive message only from AWS. It's an internal AWS service. So once we have this AWS account, we always make sure that this account is monitored by us, and then we find the correct tenant, and we tag this message during the pipeline with this internal tenant ID. So this is how it works.
And do you have the same environment spread out across different regions, or do you run it from one specific region?
Yeah, so it's whatever can. First, we do have multiple zones that we support, and we have most of the backends on them. So we have the US one, the EU one, as well as others. So to make sure that the data, most of it is like data that is centered from the application itself, like the traces that I shown before. So we want to make sure that for some customers, it is saved only on specific regions. And there, besides that, there are also part that, like I also talked about it a bit before, we have to deploy it on different regions or all of them. So for example, also the forwarding rule, it supports forwarding the data only to the same region. So this is why we have this events bus and Kinesis stream. This part is also, and also with this Lambda, this part is actually deployed in all the regions that we support, and then we ship all the data to the specific ones that we work for. It depends on the customer. So it can, then we aggregate all the data, for example, to the United States or to Europe.
All right. And something that's always interesting with these types of multi-tenant environments is to hear a bit about how you're working with new features or updates. So if you want to roll out a new feature in your environment, how do you do that?
So you mean in terms of the specifically about the tenancy issue?
No, in general. If you're adding something new in your service, how do you roll that out to a multi-tenant environment?
Yeah, so we have a complete CI/CD pipeline, of course, that goes through first a unit test, the unit test part, which is usually the unit test is less. It cares less about cloud resources, about tenants. It's just to verify our logic. But then we deploy a copy of the environment to a staging environment, which is a real environment on AWS. Then we send some kind of different data to it. Also, we use different tenants. So then we can make sure that each tenant uses only its data. It has access only to it. So then we run all this kind of this test on like real services and real AWS resources, and at the end, automatically it's being rolled out to all the AWS regions that we support.
And by the way, if changes that you make also require changing permissions, let's say for the Epsagon role, how would that process work?
Yeah, actually, it's a good question. We had to do that a few times. First, we do try to maybe even add some kind of permissions that we may need in the future. Again, read only. So for us not having to ask customers to update it, because of course it's not something that we can do by ourselves, because the customer need to actively give us more permissions. So there are a few ways to do that. First of all, of course, we just change the template and the new customers will use the new role. It's not a problem. But for existing customers, they have different kind of options. So actually, one option is just to remove the integration and add it again. And in some cases, it was the most easiest part, because we will delete the resources, but then we will re-add them. And we also had to make sure that, for example, if you have alerting setup and other kind of manual configuration, not something that we queried from your AWS account, the customer's AWS account, it wouldn't be deleted. So basically, if we just remove the CloudFormation even by mistake and edit it back, everything should be back to be the same. And this is like another important architecture decision. But it's also possible to just update the CloudFormation and, for example, add permissions or even remove permissions if a customer wants to. And in that case, you can just do it manually, and we help that. We help, like we have some customers with doing that and giving them instructions. I can also mention that when you do that, and when you do that by updating the CloudFormation, we also get a message by that through the same SNS topic. Currently, we didn't have a need to handle this message, and for example, to initiate a new scanning. It wasn't something that big or important, but this is definitely something that other applications can leverage, and I think it can help you to do exactly that.
Awesome. Yeah, it's very important to consider those updates on customer side as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, we are approaching top of the hour, so time to wrap things up. Just had a question from the chat I wanted to bring up from Adedokunk. So you can set up this stack with Terraform, is the question.
Yeah. Actually, we had customers asking that, maybe because they have usually many AWS accounts and it's still a manual operation. So we just gave them a Terraform. You should fill in the external ID that you can get it in other ways, and then you can just, whenever you want, you can create or delete a CloudFormation, and it works really good.
All right, cool. So with that, I think it's time to wrap up. Ron, any finishing words from you about your onboarding, offboarding, integration with AWS environments that you want to add?
Not anything specifically. I think it was very interesting, and kind of we make it more sophisticated over time, and it was nice to see that there are many of the problems that AWS were aware of and help us doing it. For example, using the callbacks and using the being able to stream data using CloudTrail. So this kind of stuff really makes the integration much easier for us and for the customers.
Yeah, and I really, one thing I took away is the event-driven approach to it, making use of those events instead of basically having scheduled scans or something like that. And also remembering that offboarding flow. Don't wait to create your offboarding flow as well. Have that as your initial plan where you're building something like this.
Yeah, totally agree.
All right. With that, Ron, thank you very much for joining. Alex as well. Thank you. And thanks to all the viewers. This has been another episode of Building SaaS on AWS. And we will, of course, be back again in 2 weeks with a new episode. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Ron, and thank you, Gunnar.
It was great. Bye-bye.